Historical note. The liturgy during Lent enables us to follow our Lord throughout the course of his apostolic ministry. First year, first of all, he spent 40 days in the desert on the Mount of Quarantine to the northeast of Bethany. Then, having drawn to himself his first disciples, he went into Galilee, returning from there to keep the first Passover at Jerusalem, where he drove the traffickers out of the temple. After having preached in Judea for several months, he went to Sychem, where he converted the Samaritan woman, then to Nazareth, where he preached in the synagogue, afterwards going to Capernaum, and then journeying through the whole of Galilee. Second year. Jesus then returns to Jerusalem, where he cured the paralytic at the pool of Bethsaida. Returning to Galilee, he preached the Sermon on the Mount, Mount Kern Haddon. Having returned to Capernaum, he there cured the centurion's servant, and afterwards, at Naim, raised the widow's son from the dead. At that time, he commenced a fresh course of preaching in Galilee, afterwards going to Bethsaida, Julias, in the kingdom of Philip. It was in the neighborhood of this town that our Lord multiplied loaves. Then he walked to the shores of the lake on his way back to Capernaum. Third year. After this, our Lord traversed the regions of Tyre and Sidon, followed by his enemies while passing through Sarepta. He granted the petition of the Canaanitish woman, and, coming back by Caesarea Philippi, returned to Galilee, where the transfiguration took place on Mount Tabor. After arriving at Capernaum, he preached to his apostles on the mercy of God, and then went to Jerusalem for the feast of the tabernacles. There he confounded the Jews who accused him of breaking the Sabbath, pardoned the woman taken in adultery, taught in the temple, and cured the man born blind. Having been again in Galilee, Jesus went into Perea, where he restored his speech to a dumb man, and showed how Jonas was a type of the resurrection. Then, going to Jerusalem for the feast of the dedication, he returned to Perea, where he spoke the parables of the prodigal son, and of Dives, and Lazarus, and from whence he was called to Bethany, where he raised Lazarus from the dead. After visiting Ephraim, he turned his steps to Jerusalem, at the same time foretelling his approaching death. In the temple, he, for the second time, drove out the traffickers, delivered the parable of the wicked husbandman, and denounced the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. Then, climbing the Mount of Olives, and looking upon Jerusalem, where 3 days later he was to be put to death, he spoke to his disciples of the judgment that for all eternity shall separate the good and the bad.